Let me cut this off and do all that kind of stuff. Yeah, of course, what I'm trying to do is, and you grew up in Aiken, so I'm trying to get the flavor of what the town was like years ago. You were born, when were you were born here?
1932.
Okay, and where did you live?
I was born in 1932 at the corner of Richland Avenue and Marion Street in what was then called the Hires House. In other words, the Hires family lived there. And I was born there in the house in 1932.
What was the neighborhood like then? Because that's close to Schofield?
No, that's the corner of Richland and Marion is fairly close to Schofield, a couple of blocks away.
Okay.
Richland Avenue at that time, once you got past Williamsburg Street, it ended. Richland Avenue stopped right at the Williamsburg Street.
Like a dead end? No
It dead end. There was no street. The main entrance coming into Aiken back then from the east was Highway 78, which was Park Avenue at that time. But Richland Avenue ended just below Marion Street there. My grandfather had come to Aiken back in about the turn of the century as a merchant. And he and his brother-in-law, where Coward Corley Seed Company is now, he ran a neighborhood store there. And then across the street, on the other side of the railroad tracks, Mr. John Carpenter, who was his brother-in-law, also ran a neighborhood store. They were kind of competitors, so to speak, but brother-in-laws. And they came to Aiken and set up a business in those two places from Edgefield County. At that time, my grandfather, about the same time that I can start remembering things, my grandfather built a home at the corner of Marion Street and Barnwell Avenue. The home is still standing. And he built a store building behind it that faces Barnwell Avenue.
And it's still there today?
It is still there today.
Okay.
Right, the home and all is still there today.
Okay. That's next to those little apartments?
No, it's,
okay.
you know where George Anderson's house is?
Okay.
It's directly across the street from
Okay.
George Anderson's house.
Okay.
And that area of Aiken really has not changed a great deal. There's been some new homes built there, like George Anderson's house. But a lot of the old original homes that were there during the early 30s are still there. And there were a lot of children in the Williamsburg Street, Marion Street, Orange Street area, young people my age. And we used to call that Flanfoot Alley. That's what that portion of town was called at that time, was Flanfoot Alley. And we would gather up and we would go play ball against other kids that come from other parts of the town. Like Sunset Hill, there was a group that used to come down and play us.
Where was that at?
Sunset Hill was the Calumet Hill area. They called it Sunset Hill because that's where the sun always set, over that hill. So the Sunset Hill gang had come down and we'd have a ball game, usually a stick and a tennis ball is what it amounted to.
Did you have a field somewhere that you'd meet?
Right there where the corner of Richland and Marion, where the Marion Street Baptist Church is, that corner lot was, there was nothing built on it at all. It was vacant. And that was our ball playing area. We used to play ball there back during the 30s, late 30s.
And that all dirt streets, dirt roads?
All dirt roads at that time. And we also, some of us would go to the golf course and find golf balls. And we had a golf course set up in the middle of the parkway. We'd hit balls and play golf down there. And the one thing that was kind of unusual is on the east side of Marion Street in that 100 block, that sidewalk was paved. So that's where we always played with our little cars and we rode our skates and rode our bicycles. That was just, and I don't know why the city ever paved just that side of the street. And the street wasn't paved, only the sidewalk was paved on the east side of Marion Street. So we had a sidewalk place there that we could play. Now the woods directly behind Hitchcock Woods and not Hitchcock Woods, the woods directly behind Schofield School, and now where they're putting the pond out there and doing the ecological studies out there, that was an old open ditch line and a ponding area for water. And all of us kids used to play in that old ditch line. That's where we caught our first tadpoles and frogs, and learned how to pole vault. We'd cut canes off a south boundary and go back and pole vault over that old ditch. And as a small child, that's probably where I saw my first football game. We would climb up in the trees there in the woods, and when Schofield would play football, that's probably the first ball games I can remember. Most of the families that lived on Williamsburg and Marion Street at that time were white families. And then on Horry Street, most of Horry Street was black families. But we played together and was family together in that neighborhood back in the 30s. My grandfather, who built the home there on the corner, and when he had gone out of the local merchant business and kind of got into local government, he was a police officer for the city of Aiken.
And what was his name?
Seif, S-E-A-F-E-E, Seif Busbee. And Daddy Seif had become a police officer with the city of Aiken Police Department. And I look back over some of the old records of where he wrote people tickets, like saw one that's quite interesting. He fined a fellow, I think it was 50 cents for spitting on the street. Back then it was against the law to spit tobacco on the streets of the city of Aiken. And there was another case that him and another police officer made against a fellow for racing a goat cart.
Goat?
A goat cart down Lawrence Street. I think they fined him the big sum of like $2 or something. But I look back over the old records where and I can remember Daddy Seif being in uniform. And I was pretty well raised. My daddy worked for P.W. Townsend and Company, who owned a feed and seed place where that was just recently remodeled at the corner of Hain Avenue or B Lane, the alley, and Newberry Street, where the Robinson Humphrey just moved into.
Okay.
Yeah, he worked there for Mr. P.W. Townsend. Carlos Townsend, Mr. P.W. Townsend's son, later was a council member for many, many years. And Skipper Townsend is his son, Sue Townsend's husband. In other words, he's the grandson of Mr. P.W. Townsend, who my father used to work for. Daddy Seif also was chief of police here back right prior to my birth in the 20s. He was the police chief here in Aiken. He served a short term as police chief. But that neighborhood was a very close-knit, family-type neighborhood. If the kids got out of line anywhere in the neighborhood, whoever the parent was that was closest took care of the situation. You know, and I mean, I'm serious, they took care of the situation.
Tore you up, man.
Tore us up, that's right. We had, and everybody, all the parents looked after all the kids. And you never knew how many would be at anybody's given house at any time, you know. And the other thing that was made kind of a gathering place for the neighborhood there was we had one street light, which was an incandescent bulb on a street pole right in the middle of the block of Marion Street. And of course in the summertime all us kids played out there under that street light. There was one street light in that neighborhood. So it was a very, it was a good neighborhood, a lot of good hard-working people that lived in that neighborhood. And the neighbors all got along together, supported each other in what they done. Back then everybody had their own garden, and everybody had a cow staked out in the parkway. You know, we had our own milk, and we had a couple of hogs down in the edge of the woods there behind Schofield School that we raised every year. And we were kind of almost self-sufficient down there.
And what you need to have.
And this was in the third, you know, right after the Depression. So people money was very, very tight at that time. And my granddaddy ran that store. Him and my grandmother did on a part-time basis. He worked with the police department, and then him and Mammy, my grandmother, ran the store back then. I can remember people going in and buying on credit. And everybody bought on credit back then.
Okay, you were talking about buying on credit?
Yeah, most of the people that would come into Daddy C's store they'd all have a little, he had a little book that he kept all the credits in for the people to buy, and then they'd come in once a week or whenever they got paid, and they would always pay him, you know. But most of the people back then were very honest. I doubt he lost hardly anything on his credit dealings. But it gave me an opportunity to see how he dealt with people. He was always nice to people, and everybody had a great deal of respect for him, and he was a person in the community there that everybody kind of looked to, being a police officer back then.
How about the railroad station back then? Was it?
All right. One of the thrills we used to have every year is Aiken at that time had no industry at all except the agricultural industry. We had, as far as I know, the only thing that even close to being an industry was
Jason Wheeler with Channel 6 is here.
Okay. Let's see.
Aiken at that time really and truly had no industry. The only close industry to us was the Bills and the Grantville area, or Augusta. We had no industry in the city of Aiken. The only thing we had that even closer resembled an industry was the cotton gin that we had down at the corner of Williamsburg and Richland Avenue. So each year when the horses came into Aiken, and the people that followed the horses, the winter colony people came in, that was a big event here in Aiken. And we would go down to the old passenger depot. At that time we had a passenger depot at the corner of Union and Park. In a beautiful old building that they came into. Most of them came in by rail. And a lot of them had their own private cars, rail cars that they came in with. And they would bring with them a lot of horses by rail. And we would go down and watch them unload the horses and take them over to the winter colony estates over on the south side of Aiken. But that was a big, the train station was a big thing in our life back then. And of course we all went to the old Aiken Institute, which is now the library, and we all walked from in that part of town. We would walk to school. We didn't have, buses didn't pick us. We didn't have buses back then. You know, we had to walk to school. And of course we'd walk right by the train station almost every day during school time to and from. And we'd watch to see the train come in or come up that cut, huffing and puffing. You know, that was a big thrill for us. And we had a limited number of automobiles in Aiken at that time. I can remember you almost knew everybody had a car. And we had no parking controls. People just parked kind of where they wanted to. And I can remember my dad having a 19 Model A, I think it was about a 29 model with a rumble seat. And we would go to town and what was then Rogers Grocery Store, which is about where the jewelry store is now next to the commercial hotel. And we'd go in there, and Mama, once a month, she'd buy staples, flour, and sugar, and salt, and that kind of stuff. Because most of the stuff that we ate, we raised. She either canned or put up, and we were not the only ones that did that. Most everybody did that back then. You know, we had rabbits and chickens and hogs and cows, and just about everything we had to eat and all, we put up ourselves, except for the staples that she had to buy. And I can remember going up there and shopping with Mama as a boy. And Main Street would be, there was brick. The street was brick at that time. And there was no parking regulations. You just stopped. You know, you just stopped your vehicle and went to wherever you was going to go.
How about the sidewalks? Were they?
Sidewalks were in at that time in downtown Aiken. We also had a theater. We had the Patricia and the Rosemary theaters. Mr. Burt Ram, who first came to Aiken and built those after City Hall burnt. I remember when the fire station and City Hall and the theater burnt in 1936. My dad took me up and we stood on the corner where Hudson Etheridge is now and watched the old fire station and theater house burn. And after that happened, then Mr. Burt Graham, who operated the theater business, he went up on Main Street and built the two theaters. Well, he built where Mr. Walter Burkall is at.
Mhm.
That was the first one. And then he built the second one. And I can remember walking to town and seeing, when I was a little fella, and we would walk to town on Saturday, get our quarter, which was our allowance. And for 25 cents, you could go see the movie, get popcorn and a drink, you know, and stay there all day watching the movies. And we had things like Roy, you know, the old Roy Rogers movies and the first Batman type things and that kind of stuff. The old time serials, Tom Mix and all those old things. Entertainment at home back then was a radio. And we'd listen to Amos and Andy and the Inner Sanctum and the news, those type things, you know. I can remember listening to Pearl Harbor, the reports on Pearl Harbor coming over our old radio at home on December 7th, 1941, when they bombed Pearl Harbor. I can remember that, and can remember what it did to the community, and how people rallied around and supported, you know, that effort during the war. But Aiken back then was a good, clean town, full of good people. It was a pretty town.
You had your parkways.
We still had the parkways. All the roads was not necessarily paved, but they were defined. All the roadways and parkways were defined and pretty well planted. I could also remember during city elections, they would get in front of the commercial hotel and block off the street. They'd block off Richland Avenue, and they had a big board. They would display all the numbers as they would come in from the different voting places, you know. And I also remember the old bell that used to hang in the intersection of Newberry Street and when a fire would come in.
That's the bell we have hanging.
The bell we have hanging now in this building was in Newberry Street in front of, at that time, the Public Works Department was in that parkway. And it was a separate entity from the city. It was a water commission back then. And they had their office in the center of the parkway, and we had the old bell mounted on poles right there in front of their office. And it was hooked to an old gamewell system that was in the fire station. And if it rang one, it had up to 5 rings on it. And if it rang one time, that was for one section of the city, and 2, and so on and so on. They had the city cut up into 5 sections. I can remember the old steamer being used, and the old trucks that we had, the 1929 and the 27 American LaFrancis we had back during those times, going to fires. In fact, I watched them work the old fire when it burnt down City Hall and the old theater and the old fire station.
They had the old pumper?
Yeah, they had the old pumper back then, the old 29 and 27 when that happened in 36.
How about you remember any of the old hotels like the Highland?
Right. During my time, the Highland Park Hotel had already burnt, and also the Park in the Pines had burnt. But the Wilcox at that time was a very thriving hotel. Along with that, the old Henderson Hotel, where Palmetto Federal is at now. That was a very thriving hotel, along with the commercial hotel, which is the Holly Inn now. It was called a commercial hotel back then. So we had, and then we had another one on Park Avenue across from the courthouse. So we had 3 or 4 thriving hotels that was taking care of the winter colony, a lot of the winter colony people, and of course the transit people who came through Aiken during that time.
How about, wasn't there a lot of boarding houses too?
We had a lot of boarding houses that boarded the people that came in with the horses, principally. And we also had the old Titanian Hall that was torn down. It was behind where the Nations Bank is now, where the bank parking lot is now. That used to be the old
Well,
Titanian Hall.
What was it? What
It was
they
a
did there?
dance place where the people that came in with the horses, and local people too, would have a dance there on Friday and Saturday nights. There were some shops down below it, and then it was on the second floor. But it was torn down during the time that the bank started to remodel it.
How about, was the farmer's market
Farmers,
down
the farmers market was not where it is now. At that time, where the farmers market is now, was a huge cotton platform. And that's where all the local cotton in the area was brought to be shipped by rail principally, to the factories down in Graniteville or other places that brought cotton.
there? Was that after it came from the gin?
That was after it come from the gin there at the corner of Williamsburg and Richland Avenue.
Okay.
And then there was a big cotton gin there. The farmers market did not come till later. Most of the farmers back then that sold produce here in Aiken, because like I said, most families raised their own. But those that did sell produce, for those families that didn't, was usually done out of a wagon, or either out of an older type truck vehicle that would go around, just drive around the streets and sell from their vehicles, either their wagons or either from their vehicles. The farm in front of the commercial hotel, that parkway that used to be there had a watering trough, and all the families that would come to town to shop downtown, that would come in their mules and wagons and their horses and wagons, I can remember them being tied up out there in that parkway because there was a watering trough there for them. And another thing that was kind of unique is downtown on Williamsburg Street, right in front of the cotton platform, there was a little octagon-shaped building right in the center of the parkway, and that was the downtown police station. Back then, they had a little octagon-shaped building and a watering trough there because it was kind of a meeting place where the cotton platform was.
Down Williams?
It was out,
Down Williamsburg Street?
yeah, at the corner of Williamsburg and Park Avenue. Right down the center of the parkway, there was a little octagon building. And the night patrolman that walked all of that area and checked all the buildings at night, that's where he went in to get out of the cold or rest a few minutes before he made his rounds again around the neighborhood in what we call the downtown area. Back then we referred to Lawrence Street as Uptown.
Okay.
And then everything starting about Fairfield Street down to Williamsburg Street, that was downtown. Aiken.
Uptown and downtown.
And we had an uptown and a downtown, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where was the main police station?
The main police station was there at where the city hall burnt, where the old theater burnt and the fire station was. It was there. Now, after the fire, of course, the WPA, we got a WPA grant loan from the federal government, and they built City Hall and the police station in 1937. But the police department was pretty well there, right behind the old theater that burnt and the fire station that burnt, there on Park Avenue and B Lane in the alley back then.
What can you remember about some of the policemen back there, some of the original ones, and some of the chiefs and stuff?
Okay, most of the original policemen were older fellows. Most of them were. They were usually local people that had been raised in the community, like my grandfather, and most of them knew everybody. That was the secret of having a good police force back then. They knew everybody. For example, as I became a little older and got into the teenage level and started hanging on Main Street, because that's what we used to do, because we had nothing else to do. We'd go to the movie, or either we had a couple of drive-ins, restaurants, where you could go in and get a hamburger or something like this, some French fries or something. But the downtown patrolman, a lot of times, Mr. Henry Hires would be walking the beat downtown. You heard us talk about Mr. Henry Hires. Well, he'd come over and if we were just walking, and hanging out there by the soda shop, the old drugstore there at the corner, It was a drugstore on one corner, Blake's Drugstore, under the commercial hotel, right down the corner. And then on the other end, we had another eating place, the Dinner Bell Restaurant, Dinner Bell, down there. The other place they hung out.
Is that like where Aiken Drive is?
No, that's
Or-
where Judy's
Okay.
dress shop was,
Okay.
right down the corner.
Okay. Was the
But
dinner
those
bell-
were the two kind of a hangout places.
Okay.
And some of the people that we went to school with would have automobiles and the old 30 model cars, and if anybody had a car, he never rode by himself, it'd be 8 or 10 with them, you know. And it'd get about 10 o'clock or 10:30, and Henry would walk down the street, and if he caught us up there, he'd say, you know, it's time for you to be home in bed now. You know, it's getting late, and he'd send us home. And he sent us home with authority. It was like, either go home, or I'm gonna call your parents, or I'm gonna take you home, one of the two. So it was that kind of situation for us. And but they were all good men. Most of them local men. Most of them had a great concern for the community. Most of them knew the community. They all walked. We didn't have cars back then. I think the chief had a car, and they had one other patrol car, I think, about a 37, 38, 39 model, one of the first police cars I remember. And now we had a lot of traffic come through town. See, Aiken was on US 1, which was the main route from Miami to Florida, to New York. That was, US 1 was the main route.
And where did it run? Like
It
where
ran-
number one, like it is today?
It runs like it is today, except back then we
Goes
didn't
to
have.
Augusta?
It went on to Augusta, but it went through the valley, where 421 is now. We didn't have the 4-lane to
Okay.
Augusta like it is now. Well, no, US 1 ran through the valley. And we had a lot of traffic through Aiken at that time, because like I say, it was US 1. That's the reason our hotels and all survived like they did for a small community back then, is because we were US 1.
What gas stations do you remember? through there?
One of the main ones I remember that used to be the high-low service station was at the corner of Pendleton and Richland. And I worked there. That was where I got my first away-from-home job. Mr. DeLoach ran that service station. And he gave me a job and paid me 25 cents an hour for pumping gas and changing oil, and putting air in tires, and cleaning up after school. That was one of the first jobs I
What
ever
was it called?
had.
High-low?
It was called High-Low Service Station.
Mm.
And it was a Mr. DeLoach that ran it. And we had, the Gulf Station was there at the corner of York Street and Richland Avenue. And then right in the middle of the block, there was another station where Mr. Holly has his, the Holly Inn new addition that was
Mhm.
built, a 2-story.
Mhm.
There was a service station and a car dealership there that was ran by the Whittle brothers, that eventually built the building over on the opposite corner at Newberry and Richland, where Fast Copy and all is in now.
Okay.
But they ran a car dealership there and ran a little service station there in front. They sold gas and oil too. And back then we didn't have any lifts, we had pits. You know, you'd go down in the pit to change the oil and this kind of stuff. But then the next job I got was McCrory's Dime Store. I got a job after school as the stock boy and got a big raise. Made 35 cents an hour working there after school. And that was a real big jump for me to get a 10 cents on an hour rate. And that was big money back then, Pete, you know, to make that kind of money. And of course, the high school was right here next door to the public safety building. The old high school was there.
So they go from what, the old grade school?
Yeah, well, you'd go from the old Aiken Elementary, you would
Okay.
come from there over to here,
Okay.
the old Aiken Institute. You'd go from there to the high school.
Okay.
And my sister, my older sister, Jimmy, she was in the first class that walked from the old Aiken Institute and came over here and occupied that new high school.
All right.
She was in the first group that came over here.
You remember any of your principals or teachers
Oh,
or
yeah,
anybody?
yeah. They, Mr. Parker was a very, and Mr. Hagan were principals of the high school that were super individuals. They were just outstanding principals. They knew all the kids and were very much involved with them, as our principals are today, and very inspirational people. And I had people that taught me that I remember real well is people like, gee, I can't even think of her name now. It passes me. Mrs. Rutland, Mr. A.J. Rutland's wife, was my history teacher. I remember her real well. Clifton Weeks' wife was one of my teachers also. And her name at that time was Frances, I want to say Beatty was her maiden name prior to marrying Clifton. But I remember her, and another one I remember quite well was, it was an excellent teacher, and that was Mrs. Marines. She married Staffy Marines, who used to be very hardworking and prominent here in the community. He was one that strived to get business and industry and so forth. He ran the Aiken bottling company down there on Williamsburg Street. But his wife, before he married her, was also one of my old school teachers. I remember quite well. Then I had Mrs. Jumper as an elementary school teacher. I remember her. And Mrs. Teague was the librarian. I remember Mrs. Teague well. She was a fine teacher. And we had a principal at Aiken Elementary at that time that would tan your hide right quick. She had a little board that she used on us for influence. And her name escapes me now. I want to say Mrs. Red or Mrs. Isaac. What was her name? But anyhow, she was very stern, a very stern disciplinarian, and you just didn't get away with anything, at all with her. If you got sent to the office up with her, you could really get to look to be straightened out. But back then, Pete, not only did the teacher and the principal straighten you out, but your parents were notified. And when you got home, you got straightened out again.
The third time.
The third time. You got a notice the third time, right. You sure did.
What was it like between Aiken and Augusta back then? Did y'all travel there much?
We only traveled to Augusta probably maybe 7-8 times a year. We would go over there sometimes for purchases, as far as shopping. My mama and my grandmother would. But that was an all-day trip. You planned that. If you were going to travel to Augusta, that was an all-day trip. I never will forget one time I went to Augusta with my mother, and my grandmother was in the front seat of that Model A Ford Roadster. And me and my sister Jimmy was in the rumble seat of the Roadster. And we were going to Augusta. And we got to Augusta and went across the 5th Street Bridge and turned right on Broad Street. And at that time they had on Saturdays they'd have a policeman almost at every other corner. And Mother got down to the lower end of Broad and was going to make a U-turn to go back up the other side of the street. We were going to Cress's dime store over there. At that time they had a large dime store that Cress's did, and we always went there to shop. Mama and them did. And there was a big sign that it said no U-turn, and Mama proceeds to make a U-turn. And there was a policeman on the corner, and he blowed that whistle, and it sounded like it was right in my ear. And said, "Hey, lady, you can't do that." And Mama stuck her head out the window. She said, "Oh, I think I can make it all right." And I just hid in the rumble seat because I knowed he was going to lock us up and put us in jail. But he didn't. He let her go ahead and make the turn. But Augusta was a bustling community back then. It was a hub of this general area.
Would you enjoy going there?
Oh yeah, we used to enjoy
a big treat?
Well, it was a big treat to go to Augusta. You'd cross the river and see the big Savannah River and cross the bridge, a big bridge, the 5th Street Bridge, and then the tall buildings. We had no tall buildings in Aiken. You know, the old Augusta Chronicle building over there was a tall, tall building. And we'd get to see the big buildings. And we always knew if we went to Augusta, we got a treat. We'd go to Cress's and get some ice cream or a soda or something like that. So it was a big deal to go to Augusta shopping, you know. But I say we only did that probably 7, 8 times a year. You know, it was a long trip to go from here to Augusta back then. All day job.
Let's see. How about, what do you remember back then, some of the business people, the lawyers, the business people,
Okay.
that had influence in the town?
People that had the most influence back then that I can remember, of course, the Hollies did, because they ran, Mr. Holly, Mr. Forrest Holly's father, ran the commercial hotel right in the center of town. Mr. Holly, the other Holly brother, also ran the car dealership, the Ford dealership, which was downtown right there where there's a real estate place there now. Used to be
On Lawrence Street?
on Lawrence Street, right there.
Yulee
Turn
Sally's
in-
there?
Yeah, where Yulee Sally is now.
Okay.
That used to be the Ford dealership right there, and Mr. Holly ran that. And then down the street, you had another influential merchant, Mr. Lewis Wise, ran a hardware store where Security Federal Bank is right now. And then on down the street, you had Powell Hardware, that the Powells, you know, the old Powell family, that and the people, Mr. Crofton knows that operated that. And then I can remember the banking people that were very influential at that time, the Mcnairs, back then were very influential people, the banking people were. And also your church ministers. I can remember the people that the pastor of the First Baptist Church that we were members of.
Was that church where it is now, the Baptist church?
No, the old church is, yes, it's on the same little site.
Right, it's
But the
not.
church has been torn, the old original church was torn down to make room for the gym that's built there now. Now the old Sunday school building, the 3-story brick Sunday school
Mhm.
building, is right in the center
Mhm.
between the church and it. Now that was part of, I can remember that being the Sunday school room,
Mhm.
back when I went to Sunday school, and church there. But they were influential. And then you had a lot of, the Weekses were very influential people back then. Even back then, our old mayor, Mayor Weeks, and his parents. You had some farmers that were very influential, and of course Mr. Weeks' family were farmers. You had Mr. Toole and those was the influential attorneys at that time, and you also had people like Dorsey Librand and Strom Thurman that had an office downtown. Were very influential people in the community.
How about doctors back then?
Doctors in, we had Dr. Boone, who was our family doctor, and you had Dr. Wyman at that time was a very influential doctor. And then shortly thereafter, Dr. Wallace McNair came, and he was a very strong doctor person back then for the community, Mr. Wallace McNair.
How about the hospital? Do you remember when they opened it?
No, I don't remember when it was open, Pete. I remember I had to go into the hospital when I was about 11 or 12 years old.
The hospital where the
Where the old
complex
county
is
office
now?
complex is now, right. And it was there then, and of course operated by the county at that time. But you had if I'm not mistaken, they only had the front portion. The back wing had not been added, I don't think, at that time when I was in the hospital. But Dr. Wyman, Dr. Boone, the dentist was Dr. Milner downtown, rough as a cob. You know, that's Ash Milner's father, and he ran a dentistry downtown. He was upstairs over there, close to where the Farmers and Merchants Bank used to be. And Mr. Toole and Toole's offices was right along that same block, too. And then we had another gentleman that ran Dr. Blake ran the Blake's Drugstore downtown. And then Mr. Herman Horn and those ran Horn and Company, where Aiken Drug is now, which was a large grocery store. And they catered a lot to the Winter Colony, Horn and Company did. And then down on the other corner, we had another drugstore. And he was a druggist and photographer. And I can't remember his name right now, but he ran a little drugstore and did photography work at the corner of Hain Avenue and Richland, right across from where the bank's at now. There's a little corner store right there on the corner, and that was a corner drugstore at that time. So we had 2 drugstores downtown. Then downtown, very influential person in the community was Mr. C.C. Johnson, that ran the.
Was he black?
Yes, he was African American that was very influential. A lot of people in the community depended upon him, particularly all the people in the downtown area. Pretty well shopped at Mr. Johnson's drugstore. That's where everybody in the downtown area went to buy most of their drugs, you know, because it was closer, you know. And Mr. Johnson was a fine person, and he, you know, back then those druggists were almost like doctors themselves. You know, they could tell you to take this cough syrup or that cough syrup, right? Some of the old home remedies, you know, back then.
Tell me, there's 2 people that I can remember that no one's talked about. Tell me, one is Mr. Cook. We call him Cookie, who is
Okay, Mr. Ira Cook.
Ira Cook. Tell me about him.
Okay, Mr. Ira Cook was a police officer with the city of Aiken back in the 50s and later on in the 60s. In Ira's job, principally, he was a small person, but he was a local person. And Mr. Ira's job was principally doing all the parking meters in Aiken. He was in charge of all the parking meters. And Ms. Goss, if you remember her that used to work here, assisted Mr. Cook, and we called him Cookie. And he had a 3-wheel motorcycle, police motorcycle back then that he worked out of, and policed all of the parking meters.
And they had parking meters on Park Avenue, and then Lawrence,
and Richland.
Some on Richland, like in the downtown part.
Right.
Okay. And then the other fellow is, you remember the old fellow they called Deacon Jones, the black
Deacon
guy
Jones.
on the wagon?
Deacon Jones lived at the corner, if I remember correctly, he lived about the corner of Ory and Richland. And Deacon had a horse and wagon that he rode children principally all over town. But he would deliver anything for you, or haul anything for you in his wagon. And all the kids knew Deacon Jones. And he would pile all us in that wagon of his, and he would ride us all over this community. But all the children loved Deacon Jones.
See, because I remember him when I was real small.
Right.
Big old tall, skinny black
Big,
guy.
tall, skinny
Big
fella.
hands.
Great big hands. Oh, he could cover your whole face with his
He
hands.
had what, like a mule, didn't he have like
Had a mule, right, and he old green wagon with red wheels, right,
Mhm.
and he'd ride the kids all over town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Tell me, when you first, of course, when you went through school here, and then you went in the Navy,
Went in the
and
Navy.
then came back to
Right.
Aiken.
I came back to, what happened to me was quite dramatic in that I went in the Navy in 1950, June of 1950, and shortly thereafter they announced the Savannah River site. They also announced the Korean War. I joined the Navy like on June the 5th, and then on July the 1st they went to war in Korea. And then shortly thereafter they announced the Savannah River site. So I was immediately shipped to San Diego, California, and given a short basic training program and put right on a ship, putting it in commission to go to Korea. And so I was gone from Aiken for over 2 years before I ever returned. And of course when I returned in 1952, you can imagine what happened with the influence of all these people into the community.
You
all
can
the
really tell the
construction
difference.
workers. They had a tremendous trailer park out there at Robbins Trailer City, and they'd thrown up all of these houses that used to be where H.O. Weeks is at now. And out here in Vanwood, all those houses that they'd thrown up.
Crosland Park too.
Crosland Park was being built at that time. Yeah, all of that was being done, and of course, that was just something that happened overnight almost for me. And I only stayed home like a couple of weeks leave, and then I went back and was gone for 2 more years, and really didn't come back home until 1954. And of course, when I came back home in '54, the influence here was greatly felt by all the development on the south side.
Back then, had they built Mitchell Center? Had they started building some of
No,
that?
well, they had started Mitchell Shopping Center in the late '50s.
Because was the
50s.
golf course pretty much the last thing out Whiskey Road prior to that?
Right, when you went out, before I went in the Navy, when you went out Whiskey Road and you passed the golf course, you were in the country. There's nothing else except a few homes down Highway 19 south until you got to Old Ellington. There was nothing but country out there. So when you passed the Famata Golf Club, you were in the country on 19 south. And nothing had been built up until 1950.
And then when you came home, it was...
When I came home, all that Aiken Estates was started, and Mitchell Shopping Center was started, and all that in the mid-50s out there. So I saw a dramatic change. I left and came back. And also, I was in a rest camp in Kumamoto, Japan. We had just did a 90-day stretch up on in Wonsan Harbor up there, and during the war. And they pulled us out and sent us to a rest camp in Kumamoto, Japan. And while I was sitting by a swimming pool, a shipmate of mine came up and said, "Carol, aren't you from South Carolina?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, look at this story on the front page of the Stars and Stripes." Stars and Stripes was the military paper. There was a picture of Aiken and the explosion that had occurred in 1953. And it was on the front page of the Stars and Stripes. And of course, it scared me half to death. And I went to the local base there and got them to try to get me some information. And they couldn't for a couple of days. And they finally got through, and the Red Cross did, and found out that none of my family was affected by it, even though my mother only lived right up here on Lawrence Street. And at that time, she was working in the downtown area, but had not gone to work that morning yet, before the explosion happened. So I seen a great change in Aiken when I came back in 1954. Tremendous change in the community.
And then when you came back, you were at the plant originally?
Yes, I worked at the Savannah River plant there for a short period of time, and then came to work for the city. Right.
Describing when you came with the city, of course, you came with the fire department, and kind of take me through the steps on that and
Okay.
how
When I
many
came to
people,
work on the fire department,
and name some of the people.
okay. When I came to work on the fire department, we had 4 full-time people. It was myself and Hack Williams was on one shift, and we worked 24 hours on, 24 hours off. The other shift was Shorty Perdue and Charlie Cup was the other that worked opposite us, the other two. And above the fire station, we had sleeping quarters upstairs, 2 large bedrooms and a kitchen. And all the other firefighters were volunteer firemen. And back then we had 3 pieces of equipment. We had a 29 LaFrance, and we had the 1942 Chevrolet that was the one that was given to us by the military that was used out at the Army Air Base, and the old 42 Chevrolet. And we had a 1953 Ford Howe that had 500 gallons of water on it, and we had the 1954 convertible Howe. The 1953 Ford was purchased after the gas explosion and the serious fire we had in the downtown area. And the 54 Howe that we got, it was a convertible. It was given to us as a grant from the federal government that the contractors at SRS helped the city put together a grant program to purchase that piece of equipment. So we had basically 4 pumpers, and we had 4 full-time people and about 15 volunteers. The chief at that time was volunteer. The fire chief was Mr. Frank Harley. And chief of the police department at that time was Zip Hanner, was the police chief at that time. And Mr. Paul Grant was the detective for the city of Aiken at that time, right.
And then from that, he went to sheriff?
And yes, from that,
Yeah.
he went to the sheriff's department. And we pretty well stayed at that level from about 57 or 8 long in there until they put the fire chief, made Frank Harley the full-time paid fire chief about 1960, and made me the full-time fire inspector about 1961. And then from there, then the department grew.
It started growing?
It started growing from there as the growth of the community started, based upon the Savannah River plant. And then we began to land some additional industries. Owens Corning came, which was another large industry for us. And then we began to develop the airport industrial park, and then Aiken just kept growing from there. So we had about 19 people in the fire department back then, about 15 volunteers and 4 full-time, and we had probably 20 people in the police department, I would say, counting the chief and then the executive and the people that worked in the records department and the full-time policemen. We had probably about 20 people. So we went from about 20, at that time, about 25 full-time people to 100 full-time people today.
Big change. Okay. Let's see, tell me, well, when you first came, you were here before Mr. Wendall?
Yes.
Okay, tell me who was city manager and then clerk or clerk. Tell me something about city government then.
Okay. When I came to work for the city of Aiken, Mr. Powell Black was the city manager. The city had just recently voted to go to a manager council form of government, and they appointed the first city manager, which was Powell Black. Powell, shortly thereafter I came, he moved on and went to another city as city manager, and Mr. Harding Hughes was hired. Mr. Hughes was a very progressive individual that wanted to see the city government improved. He was very innovative. He did some very innovative things. He started our first depreciation fund for replacement of our equipment. He also started a retirement system for the city employees. He was very, very interested in the fire department. He used to ride fire trucks. When he'd hear at that time we had a siren downtown and a siren uptown that we blew if we had a fire. And when Harding would hear the truck starts to crank up, if he was in his office, he'd take off running and come on in and jump in the fire truck with one of us, because we'd have to write it on the board and let the doors up and blow the sirens and then go to the fire. So Harding used to come with us. But our mayor then was Mayor Weeks. Our clerk at that time was Mr. Ellis. Mr. Ellis was a fine gentleman, was clerk for many, 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 many years with the city of Aiken. Mr. Ellis was our city clerk, and Mr. Charlie Munkenfoos was our public works director. And then some other people that I remember in city government back then was Major Bainham. Major was one of the principal, he was the foreman for the public works department, and did an outstanding job for us. And we had, under Mr. Munkenfoos, he also had John Thomas. John Thomas was a very sharp individual, and he was one of Mr. Munkenfoos's foremen on the water department. He ran the pump stations and did all the repairs and plotted all the valves and this kind of stuff. Back then, we really had limited number of people and department heads. We had Frank Harley was the fire chief, Zippo Hanna was the police chief, Mr. Ellis was the city clerk, Mr. Munkenfoos was the public works director, and Harding Hughes was the city manager. And back then, the recreation department was very, very small at that time. And I'm trying to remember who was the recreation director at that time.
That'd be probably way before Mike Facio?
Yeah, that would be
Way
prior to
before.
Mike Fasciola. I can't remember who that gentleman's name was. Gene Fuller. He was a very unique individual. Gene was. He was the one that promoted. We did the longest hot dog in the world out at Aiken High School as a promotion for one of his escapades. Gene was really, he was really something back then.
They made one big long hot dog?
He got the bakery over in Augusta, I think it was Colonial Bakery, to bake him a bun, and he got the one of the big hot dog producers over there in Augusta to produce him a hot dog, and they got all the kids out in high school, and I think they had enough to feed the whole high school out of that hot dog. But Gene Fuller was the recreation director. Harding Hughes, the city manager, then left and went to Durham, North Carolina as the city manager, and at that time Roland Wendall came on board. Roland came here from Rock Hill and started as our city manager. Then we went through a pretty strong growth stage with Roland. Mr. Frank Harley died, and after he died, then Roland appointed me fire chief, and pretty well stayed that way until we went through Mr. Hanna. Chief Hanna left and went to Greenville, and then Chief Brown came on as the police chief, who at that time was chief of detectives, and Jim Brown. And we had at that time, Mr. Munkenfoos was getting pretty old, and he was getting ready to retire from the Public Works Department. Mike Fasciola came on about that time, and then Mr. Munkenfoos retired. I can't remember that interim Public Works director we had back then. But then in 1970, Roland decided to go into the public safety business, and that's when he asked me to accept the position of public safety director. And at that time, Jim Brown left the city as police chief, and they abolished the police chief and the fire chief job, and made one chief over public safety in 1970.
Okay. Let's see. Probably you have so much information. I want to interview again later on.
Okay.
I'll ask you one final question, then I know you have things to do. Probably out of all the thousands of fires you've gone to and stuff, what fire sticks in your mind the most? What emergency event or fire or disaster?
Well, there's probably a couple, Pete, of emergencies that really stick in my mind. On the fire side, probably the RX drugs was the one I remember probably the most, because it was the first large fire that I had to command as fire chief. I remember that one real well.
And you could have burnt downtown
easily.
easily.
We could have easily burnt downtown down. You're exactly right. But as a result of a tremendous effort on the part of the fire department and the assistance we got from Savannah Riverside and the city of Augusta, we were able to contain it to that building. If you ride down B Lane right now and stop behind what used to be McCrory's Dime Store and look up in the second story window, you'll see the old wire glass windows are cracked. and they were cracked due to the heat
That
that was
time.
impinging upon them. And if it hadn't been for a valiant effort on the part of our ladder truck operators, which was parked in that alley protecting the backside of McCrory's, and the firefighters that had hand lines in that alley, if it ever got into the back of McCrory's, second floor, which we'd like to have, and into that stock room, we could have probably lost most of the downtown area that morning.
Name some of the firemen back then.
Well,
There.
Charlie Cupp was there, of course, and Charlie Perdue was there,
Tom,
Bronson Cromer, Howard Lawton,
Billy Ray Franklin.
Billy Ray Franklin, the Abneys, the Abney boy,
Larry.
Larry was a cadet,
What, Maroney?
and
Gilby.
Gil Maroney were cadets back then. I was trying to think, Mr. Irvin Eubanks, Mr. Hezzy Johnson, O.T. Kennedy, Stanley Robertson, all those people were volunteer firefighters at that time that helped us with that fire. But we had a serious threat to the downtown area, and that one really stands out in my mind greatly. It's one of the potential worst fires we probably experienced during my career. The other thing that I remember that was an emergency that happened to us was the flooding of Rollingwood Road. I never thought I would ever see the time that I would be rescuing people in boats in the city of Aiken, and but that was almost unbelievable to arrive down there and see water almost going into the second floor of two-story homes on Rollingwood Road.
What was that, like late 60s?
That was in the late 60s, early 70s. And at that time, it seems like me, I don't know why, maybe the weather pattern has changed, and well, it has changed. Back then, it seemed like we either had a bad ice storm or a bad flood each year. I know we used to flood downtown badly. All the stores would flood, and Richland Avenue would flood, and we'd have to get out there and slow the traffic down to keep from washing water into all the stores. And if you remember, right after that, in the mid-70s, we went to the bond issue and got enough money to put in a major storm drainage system for the downtown area. That was the time we also built the Public Safety Headquarters building and the H.O. Weeks Recreation Building and the Public Works Center. It was in 1974-75.
Okay. Anything else you can think of you want to add that I hadn't asked you? There again, I'll get with you again. You have that stuff down pat.
Yeah. Not right now.
No.
My mind's kind of drained.
Plus, yeah.
Yeah.